Venceremos Tibuneros. Well, today we're going to talk about one of the biggest lies told in political life, at least in the US and A, is that we are fighting wars for defense of national interests and to bring freedom to struggling peoples around the world. The reality is it's not a question of defense, but of empire. Let's take the first so-called proposition. What are these alleged national interests impelling the U.S. to make military commitments around the globe? It's easy to connect the economic dots, oil resources for one, and the profits of U.S.-based multinationals and exploiting those resources to keep American capital dominant in the world market. But in looking back at one particular American commitment, Vietnam, it's hard to see such transparent economic motivation. Only one word will suffice: empire. The national interest translated into maintaining the face of imperial global power in the face of its chief competitor, so-called international communism. And Asia was a perfect place for such confrontation. Unlike Cuba or Berlin, Vietnam, like Korea before it, was remote from the borders of the Cold War superpowers, thus the perfect venue for inventing steam, to avoid a real war by engaging in a demonstration, a show war. And South Vietnam, being a weak and vulnerable state where the U.S. could play bully/savior, was the perfect stage for such a production. These were the national interests at work in choosing Vietnam as the show war venue. This is why, when put to the wall, the respective Caesars, Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon, always spoke of prestige, that code phrase of empire throughout history. And in this context, it didn't matter, as it does not matter now, who was elected to take Caesar's laurel upon his brow. Caesar must fight Caesar's wars, or he is no longer Caesar. Corollary to this are the benefits the subject, the liberated peoples, are to be granted by submitting to Caesar's rule of law. Again, the real freedom of the rule is irrelevant, as seen when the people and rulers of South Vietnam demanded real self-determination, when the Ngo brothers and their successors talked about political negotiation with the Viet Cong, or the North, they were simply removed. As the Interdepartmental Working Group report of November 1964 put it, "We will oppose any independent South Vietnamese move to negotiate. The wishes of the people whom the United States claimed to be defending were simply irrelevant. Caesar also knows what's best for the little people. Thus to think for themselves is to go against their real interests, and they thus must be protected from themselves." And of course they'll be grateful to Caesar in the long run. Protesters taking to the streets of Saigon with signs saying, "America, go fight your war somewhere else," challenging America's prestige and credibility, obviously cannot and must not reflect the real wishes of the ruled. And this, of course, would be analogous to the East German leadership, whether it was Erich Honecker or Walter Ulbricht, deciding that they want to engage in negotiations with West Germany to possibly reach a settlement of neutrality with the goal of eventual unification. You can bet that had they tried such a move, they would have been quickly removed from leadership of the German Socialist Unity Party, and we would probably see Soviet tanks rolling through Berlin. Similarly, the same hypocrisy is evinced right at this moment with France and Italy bombing Libya. Of course, the mission there is not to save the uprising oppressed from any humanitarian massacres that might befall them, but simply to turn that country into another neo-colony, or to return it to its former neo-colonial status in order to extract its resources, with a puppet regime, a convenient so-called rebel leader, whoever they are, whoever he might be, in charge to manage this extraction process. So as you can see, nothing has changed since those bad old days of 1964. From Libya to Iraq, back to Afghanistan, to Bosnia, even to Central America in the 80s, let a local leader start chafing at the bit or scraping the blinker strapped to his head, and immediately one will hear the media chorus about failed states, corrupt regimes, failures to contain terrorism, a stalled nation-building process, etc., and bullshit. This, too, is imperial code for the subject nations not knowing what's good for them. In short, the U.S. Department of Defense is a department of empire. And why, in all the budget-slashing rhetoric falling from Washington like bombs from 30,000 feet, or tears of the survivors so far beneath them, why there cannot and will not be any reduction in the cost of empire until the bitter end. Knock upon my phone. Let's see who's here today. Hello? Ho Chi Minh? What's going on in the Democratic Republic of the Great Beyond? You finally beat Hitler at Pinochle. Now, how'd you pull that off? The same way you beat the USA. By letting the war maker snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Uh-huh. And how do you do that? Do what? Just stand back and allow themselves to set themselves on fire and watch their prestige and credibility go up in smoke with them.